decided to make myself comfortable because this is going to be a very long video because it needs to be. So I'm just going to jump right into it. About a month ago, I commented on one of Matt Dillahunty's videos on his Patreon, of which I am a subscribing member. And I said, Matt, again, I applaud your unwavering dedication to integrity, transparency, and sound reasoning. In this video, you correctly noted that the described tactic by religious adherents betrays their fundamental misunderstanding about debates, about the burden of proof, about falsifiability, about their need to be viewed as the hero, and utterly dishonest misrepresentation of the opposition. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to ask how well you actually apply this standard to your propositions which you already are in agreement. For instance, Premise 1. You say that you do not hold unfalsifiable propositions. Premise 2. You say that you do not have faith, you have reasonable expectations based on evidence. Premise 3. You argue that gender is a social construct. Premise 4. You argue that gender identity is an internal perception of self. Premise 5. Biological sex, physiology, sexuality, etc. are insufficient evidence to substantiate claims of a socially constructed internal perception of self, as these are not socially constructed traits, nor are they internal. Premise 6. You say that gender expression is independent of gender identity. Premise 7. You say that the fact that a person's gender identity is not aligned with an observer's perception, which can only be based on the external, is none of the observer's business. Premise 8. You argue that the claim being contested is not evidence of itself. Premise 9. You argue that a person's gender is whatever they tell you it is. Premise 10. If biological sex, physiology, sexuality, etc. are insufficient evidence to substantiate claims of a socially constructed internal perception of self, because they are not socially constructed traits, nor are they internal, and a person's gender is whatever they tell you it is, gender expression is separate from gender identity, and a claim is not evidence of its own truth, then there remains nothing by which a gender claim can be falsified. Conclusion. Therefore, there are no universal, independently verifiable, objective, external markers that can serve as evidence of any person's claimed gender identity. Conclusion 2. Therefore, under this framework, gender identity claims cannot be externally evidenced, and acceptance of them must rest on faith in self-report. Conclusion 3. Therefore, your stated rejection of faith contradicts your acceptance of gender identity claims. Conclusion 4. Therefore, gender identity claims are unfalsifiable. To be clear, this isn't transphobia. It isn't a denial of trans persons, their experiences of their self-respect. It's not abuse, bigotry, hate speech, oppression, or violence. As always, I support treating all people with dignity. I use personal pronouns. I use chosen names. I believe trans persons should enjoy the same rights, privileges, etc. as anyone else. I am not arguing that trans women are not women or that trans men are not men. Rather, I'm inquiring how, if a person asserts, I am insert gender, how can this possibly be tested, let alone falsified? I am saying the burden of proof lies with the claimant, and in the case of I am insert gender, the claimant is the person making the statement. The truth has nothing to fear from inquiry. Inquiry is not abuse, bigotry, hate speech, oppression, transphobia, or violence, and to characterize it as such is an utterly dishonest misrepresentation of the opposition. Now, it's worth noting, virtually every premise, with the exception of one, are taken directly from actual statements made by Matt Dillahunty himself. That is critical here, because in order to argue that somehow my conclusions are incorrect, he's arguing with himself. Now, a week ago, he replied to me, and he says, quoting me, If a person asserts, I am, insert gender, how can this possibly be tested? And he says, I don't need to test them, and I don't need it to be testable. What gender they identify with is irrelevant to me. I'm not exercising faith. I'm accepting their word of their internal state until such time as I have justification that they are incorrect, the same as I do for every report of internal state. I don't need them to prove they're hungry or that they're in love. Instead, I treat them as if they're honest until such time as I have a reason to believe they aren't. Similarly, I call people what they want to be called, no matter what their birth certificate says. Self-report acceptance is respect and trust, based on good evidence, not faith. Sad that after all your hounding and footnotes, you've not only missed the point, but you also missed this. Again, he's quoting me. I'm saying that the burden of proof lies with the claimant, and in the case of I am, insert gender, the claimant is the person making the statement, and he says, it's a claim you can't verify. And if you want to claim they're not being honest, you have just adopted the burden of proof. Meanwhile, when you put this much effort into footnoting your misrepresentations of my view, this isn't an epistemological claim and isn't subject to faith, in order to claim that accepting someone's word that they're hungry is faith-based, then maybe I'll answer again. Until then, goodbye. And then he follows up with another post that says, I would unsubscribe you, but I'm happy to keep having you pay to show how ridiculously obsessed and confused you are on simple topics. But you won't be getting replies on here again. Well, la-ti freaking da, Matt. Whether I'm going to get a response from you or not, I am going to give you another response to tell you how wrong you are. And this is the post that I just made. Okay, Matt, I'm going to take this line by line. You began by quoting me, if a person asserts, I am, insert gender, how can this possibly be tested? And you replied, I don't need to test them, and I don't need it to be testable. What gender they identify with is irrelevant to me. We're only 2 sentences into your response, and you're already making a statement that cannot possibly be true. You have repeatedly said in debates, lectures, columns, shows you've hosted, etc., that you do not and will not hold an unfalsifiable proposition. Yet, testability is a prerequisite for falsifiability. Therefore, your claim that I don't need it to be testable directly contradicts your own stated epistemology. An untestable claim just is unfalsifiable, which means that you cannot be true without abandoning the very principle you invoke everywhere else. In fact, you explicitly make this very point during your 2015 debate with John Ferrer, saying, this isn't just an issue of can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, it's an issue that the case should have been thrown out for lack of evidence before we started. And they should be free to resubmit when they come up with something new and actually substantial, confirmable, testable, and falsifiable. Because in every other aspect of our lives, we're going to figure it out and determine what is reasonable to believe. Those are the standards of evidence that we hold. And if we drop those standards of evidence, all sort of non-true things are ushered in. Why should we drop good standards of evidence? We have no way to currently investigate or confirm the supernatural, so supernatural causation is not allowed to enter into scientific explanations until such a time as somebody can come up with a mechanism to show that we can test it and verify it. And then it becomes part of science and not a second before. And that's exactly the way that it should be. Now, reread your own statement with one alteration. Let the topic be gender identity. You know what? I'll do you one better. This isn't just an issue of can't prove gender identity beyond a reasonable doubt. It's an issue that the case should have been thrown out for lack of evidence before we started. And they should be free to resubmit when they come up with something new and actually substantial, confirmable, testable, and falsifiable. Because in every other aspect of our lives, when we're trying to figure out and determine what is reasonable to believe, those are the standards of evidence we hold. And if we drop those standards of evidence, all sorts of non-true things are ushered in. Why should we drop good standards of evidence? We have no way currently to invest or confirm gender identity claims, so gender identity is not allowed into scientific explanations until such time as somebody can come up with a mechanism to show that we can test gender identity and verify gender identity, and then gender identity becomes part of science and not a second before. And that's exactly the way it should be. I hope this clears up any confusion as to why I'm challenging your application of epistemology and evidentiary standards. In case it doesn't, here's a logical syllogism expressing universal standards of justification taken from your own statement. First, let's define some predicates. And then I provide the logical syllogism, which basically says, Premise 1, for all propositions P, if it's reasonable to believe P, then P meets the evidentiary standard. Premise 2, for all P, if P meets the evidentiary standard, then P is testable and falsifiable. Conclusion, for all P, if it is reasonable to believe P, then P is testable and falsifiable. Conclusion 2, for all P, if P is not testable and not falsifiable, then it is not reasonable to believe P. All I've done is change the variable P. It's the exact same argument structurally. You're carving out an exemption for your P, gender identity, without justification. Therein lies the first problem. Of course, two other problems immediately arise with your response. First, I did not ask you how you personally would test the claim. I asked how anyone could test it as a matter of epistemology, not your personal preference. Your response is therefore both a straw man, you replaced my question with one you preferred to answer, and a red herring. You diverted the discussion from epistemology to your personal comfort. Second, you say you don't care if someone is lying about their gender identity, but this contradicts your favorite dictum. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Apathy toward truth is incompatible with that standard. You continue, I'm not exercising faith. I'm accepting their word of their internal state until I have justification they're incorrect. I treat them as honest until I have reason to believe they aren't. Two issues here as well. First, your own framework forbids you from ever having such a justification. You've said gender is an internal view of yourself. The fact that someone's gender identity doesn't match what you think it should be is none of your damn business. Expression is independent of identity. Claims are not evidence of themselves. So what possible reason to believe they aren't honest could ever exist? Your epistemology makes the claim unfalsifiable by design. Second, you claim this is not faith, but your own definition says otherwise. You say faith is the excuse people give for they believe something without good reason. You have no publicly available evidence for an internal mental state once all possible criteria are disqualified. By your own definition, accepting gender identity claims is faith. Respect is a moral argument, not an epistemic justification. On hunger and love, you say they're the same. They aren't. Hunger and love produce physiological signals, behavioral patterns, hormonal shifts, measurable neural correlates, observable consequences. Professionals do not rely on self-report in medicine, psychology, or law. Gender identity, by your own argument, lacks any such external markers. You have created a category with no possible evidence, then declared that belief in it is not faith. That is a contradiction. Next, you say that self-report acceptance is respect and trust based on good evidence, not faith. Again, I ask, what evidence? What evidence exists for an internal state when, according to your framework, appearance is not evidence, behavior is not evidence, biology is not evidence, expression is not evidence, physiology is not evidence, psychology is not evidence, neurology is not evidence, sex is not evidence, sexuality is not evidence, and self-report is not evidence of itself. If you appeal to any of them, you must accept that they can also be disconfirming evidence, which defeats your argument entirely. Oh, and speaking of trust, as if that's a mystical band-aid that solves your problem for you, I must ask, on what is that trust based, and how would we use it to validate this claim? After all, you said in your video titled, Atheist Debates, For the Bible Tells Me So, if a science book has 10 facts listed, and 2 are true, 6 are partially true, and 2 are false, it would be a mistake to point to the true things in order to try to justify other things that aren't known to be true or not. And all of this is true whether it's a science book that has 10 facts, or the Bible, or the Quran, or any other holy text. It doesn't matter. It's not the source of the claim that matters. It's the source of the data that matters. So if you find the source of the claim reliable, that can count a lot. But that's what apologists are relying on when they try to claim biblical authority, Quranic authority, and they're relying on the fact that there are some true things in there and some things that people find value in. Your Bible or your Quran may have many, many true statements, but we know they're true not because they're in the Bible or the Quran. We know they're true because of external evidence confirms them. And we shouldn't believe that true claims from one source in any way confirm any other claim from that source, whether it's true or not. The claims are independent. And now you apply that exact same framework to gender identity claims, or you are being logically inconsistent and committing either a non sequitur or a fallacy of composition. I'll let you decide which one it is. And I'm sorry, but trying to argue that this isn't an epistemological issue because it's about respect and trust is a moral high ground fallacy, which fails on moral terms as well, which I'll demonstrate later. Because you inflate treating someone as if X is true, which is a social courtesy, with affirming that it is in fact true, an epistemic claim. Calling someone doctor is a courtesy. Allowing them to perform surgery requires evidence. You know this. You also know that my objection is not to extending courtesy as a matter of human decency, but to affirming an ill-defined concept. If someone asserts, I am X, without knowing what their usage of X is, one cannot validly affirm this as objective truth, nor can one responsibly make any decisions involving X, because without their usage being elucidated first, one risks affirming a proposition that one would otherwise not affirm, or affirm something known to be false. This isn't prescriptivism. This is the opposite of gatekeeping. This is me saying, tell me what you mean when you use these terms so that we're all on the same page. That's not unreasonable. That's not oppression. That's how communication works. And then you say, sad, after all your hounding and footnotes, you've missed the point. Spare the theatrics. I addressed the point. You avoided it. You accuse me of misunderstanding, but never identify where or how. This is not a rebuttal. It's an evasion. You quote me again saying, the burden of proof lies with the claimant. And then you reply, it's a claim you can't verify. And if you want to claim they're lying, you've adopted the burden of proof. This is astonishing for 3 reasons. You've just admitted that it is a claim. Your words. Sure, you've tried to differentiate this claim and say that it's not an epistemological claim, but that's bogus, and you know it. All claims are epistemological in nature. You're trying desperately to make this purely a moral issue, as if morality is independent of epistemology. However, morality presumes epistemology, and this is easily demonstrable. You said during your debate with Dinesh D'Souza, even if we were to say this is all gender dysphoria and it's mental illness, and all these people aren't what they say they are, what science has to say so far, based on what we've explored and discovered within these individuals, is that supporting, encouraging, and allowing them to transition is the best path to them living the life they want to live and surviving. And until that changes, I will absolutely support what the data show is the best way to encourage trans people. Why? As soon as you even attempt to answer that question, you've engaged in, you guessed it, epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, and as such, it necessarily encompasses the concept of justification. Morality is a system of what governs our behavior, and you can't have that without justification. I agree with your assessment. Nonetheless, that assessment is the product of epistemology. It's a claim you can't verify as a full concession of the problem. If no one can verify it because it's an internal state, then no one can falsify it either because it's an internal state. Your own videos say that you reject unfalsifiable propositions. You just unwittingly acknowledge the contradiction. I never claimed any particular person is lying. I asked how anyone could ever know if they were. That's a challenge for testability, not an accusation. Your response is a straw man because you fabricate a claim I didn't make, and it's burden shifting. If you doubt it, you must prove it, instead of providing evidence for the claim that you accept. If I cannot verify dishonesty, then you cannot verify honesty. That is called faith. You can rename it respect, but renaming a thing does not change its nature. You then write, when you put this much effort into footnoting or misrepresentation of my views, what misrepresentation? I use your words, your timestamps, your definitions, your principles, and your conclusions. If I misrepresented you, it should be trivial for you to identify the false premise. You didn't, because you can't. And finally, you conclude with, I would unsubscribe you, but I'm happy to keep you paying while showing how obsessed and confused you are. You won't be getting any replies on this again. Let's be honest. You are tempted to unsubscribe me, not because I've insulted you or misrepresented you. I haven't. You're tempted to do so for the same reason that I have documented on my YouTube channel. You blocked me on your YouTube channel after you challenged me to debate you, dismissed my attempts to contact you by snail mail, ignored my attempts to contact you by email, ignored my videos I tagged you in my own YouTube channel, ignored the dozens of times I tagged you on X, and blocked me on Facebook before taking the additional step to then delete my comments, since blocking someone on Facebook doesn't automatically remove someone's comments. You're tempted to unsubscribe me here for one reason: to shut me up, because you cannot defend your position since your statements contradict your epistemology, your definitions contradict your applications, and your behavior contradicts your rhetoric. Observe. For the most part, I have remained respectful. You resorted to personal attacks, saying that I am ridiculously obsessed and confused on simple topics. I addressed your arguments. You refused to engage the argument, pivoting to tangential issues like respect and social interactions. I quoted you verbatim and provided the citations so they could be independently verified. You claimed misunderstanding and misrepresentation without demonstrating it. I asked epistemic questions. You gave moral preferences. I demonstrated flaws in your reasoning, contradictions in your framework, deflections, distractions, and evasions in your responses, and baseless accusations in your rhetoric. You demonstrated none of these in mine. That difference speaks for itself. You said before in your video titled Atheist Debates on Belief and Knowledge, I don't care if somebody says that they know I'm wrong. It's enough for them to believe that I'm wrong. And if you believe I'm wrong, then we can have a discussion about it. Yet, when I offered exactly that, clearly, respectfully, and with citations to your own statements, you did not attempt to have a discussion at all. Instead, you responded with every rhetorical maneuver I predicted and documented in the book that I sent you, you have acknowledged receiving, and you have apparently declined to read before lashing out in an ill-conceived and ill-advised Pavlovian response. Your reaction doesn't rebut my point, it validates it. And to be absolutely clear, this is not about pronouns, courtesy, or social interactions, nor is it about what bathrooms people use or what sports people are eligible to compete in or for what sports organizations. Since August 18, 2025, I have repeatedly tagged you on X with dozens of verified news stories documenting cisgender individuals falsely claiming to be transgender for financial gain, for social media growth, for access to restricted spaces, and in some cases to prey upon people. What I am addressing is not an abstract hypothetical. It's a well-documented reality of harm caused to people, including trans people, as a direct result of an obstinate refusal to engage with the elephant in the room. And no, you don't get to dismiss this with magical hand-waving woo as being rare when we cannot make any valid determination of rarity or prevalence precisely because the claims can't be tested. That is the point. I have ensured that you are fully aware of the actual point and the actual point of contention, and demonstrated conclusively why self-report alone is inadequate in context involving civil rights, legal rights, safety, access, liability, and institutional decision-making. You do not get to pretend that you don't know, because I made sure you knew. You have consistently chosen to ignore this and deliberately misrepresent it. That is the issue you continue to evade through obfuscation, false accusations, and misrepresentation. You are trying to carve out an exception for gender identity claims in which they are treated as truth-apt propositions that can inform decision-making with real-world consequences, yet without subjecting them to any sort of scrutiny, while denying that this is precisely what it's a claim you can't verify, and the fact that someone's gender identity doesn't match what you think it is none of your damn business does. It disqualifies any sort of confirmation or disconfirmation. The former is faith. The latter is an unfalsifiable claim. And an expression of self that is not a truth-apt claim cannot serve as the basis for anything. That's like trying to make a legal, medical, or moral decision based on my favorite color is red. In a social situation, I am perfectly willing to treat someone as though their favorite color is red. However, as soon as we start using color preference or states of hunger or emotion, etc., in the creation of legislation and public policy that affect other people, the mere utterance of the words will no longer be sufficient. That makes it everyone's business. I am a senior citizen. I am a disabled person. I am a veteran. I'm a widow or widower, survivor. Those are all identity claims too. All perfectly fine in social context, without any pressing. All utterly useless in a vacuum when applying for benefits. Why? Because people lie. Fraud happens. What is the justification for this identity claim? You brought up internal states like hunger and love, but no one is dictating policy based on those, so that's a lovely red herring you're waving around triumphantly like some sort of gotcha. And as I said before, doctors don't just pass out medication on someone saying the words, "I'm in pain," like it's a magical spell. They consider other forms of evidence, something your self-report only framework prohibits. When someone's behavior so plainly contradicts their own stated epistemic standards, the principle of charity is rightfully suspended. And P.S., as a reminder, below is a list of the stories of cisgender bad faith actors with which I have tagged you on X thus far without any response. We'll see if I get a response from him or if he decides that he wants to go ahead and unsubscribe me. So my intention was to include this exchange between Matt and I in a video that covers the issue in greater detail. However, I already have an update because after posting the last comment to his Patron immediately after completing the screen recording and the video you just saw, I checked my phone and I discovered that Matt had already canceled my paid Patreon subscription and deleted the thread of comments between us, all within 15 minutes of me posting the critique, as evidenced by the time that the video was posted, the timestamp of the email notifying me that the subscription had been canceled, and the terms and conditions from Patreon that explain the reasons why one's comments might be removed, only one of which is applicable, that he manually deleted them. This is the same Matt Dillahunty who allegedly claims to welcome challenges, insists that he values evidence over ego, and whose parting message said, "I would unsubscribe you, but I'm happy to keep you around so you can show everybody how ridiculous you and confused you are." Yet he did unsubscribe me, and he did censor the comments, which raises the obvious question, If my critique truly made me look bad, why delete it? Why remove the subscription? If my argument were incoherent or misrepresenting him, he had every incentive to keep it up. Yet he didn't. He removed it because it reflected poorly on him, not me. I predicted in advance exactly how he would respond. Evasions, mischaracterization, moral pivots, and ultimately censorship. And he fulfilled that prediction perfectly. Every action he took served as a real-time confirmation of the very book he acknowledged receiving and evidently never read. Without the screen recording, no one would have believed this to have happened, or to have happened this quickly. But the evidence now speaks for itself. Keep running, Matt.